Hello and welcome into the Take the North podcast, along with Dan Wiederer of the Chicago Tribune. I am Mark Grote of Chicago Sports Radio 670 The Score. I'd say it's somewhat of an eventful day out at Haugh today. Caleb Williams was speaking, and there were a few injuries. Guys a little bit banged up as we bring in Dan Wiederer, who is at Haugh, and I am in our Score studios, just having gotten off the air, talking a lot about the Bears. But Dan, you are there, and I see three names, Kyler Gordon, Roschon Johnson, and Darnell Wright, who may be banged up a little bit. What can you add to that out there in Lake Forest, my friend?
Yeah, Roschon Johnson was one of the players who was not available to begin practice today, dealing with a foot injury. Doug Kramer also on that list. A handful of guys that have been there for a while: Zay Frazier, Shamar Turner, Karan Amagaji's still out as well. So there are some banged up Bears at this point. Kyler Gordon left the field today with an injury, which we'll find out more about on, I guess it would be Friday morning, losing track of the dates, which Dennis Allen also did today. So he has no idea what day it is, what time it is, but he does know that they're through 13 camp practices. So that's where we are here in August, Grote. We're trying to figure out where we're at, what day it is, and who's healthy and who's not.
Yeah, and I mean, it happens, man. There can be a march of injuries on any day of guys just leaving the game, but you definitely don't like hearing names like Darnell Wright and Kyler Gordon especially. I don't like seeing Roschon Johnson there either, but we know where the value lies. Hopefully we get an update on this in quick fashion and find out what's going on. Hopefully it's not a big deal, but those are obviously worth mentioning. Caleb Williams was front and center as we record this podcast on a Thursday. By the way, Caleb Williams will be joining the Rahimi and Harris show on the Score around 1 o'clock on Friday. But Dan, what did you hear from QB1 today?
Well, we are about a month out from the season opener on the big stage, which I believe is September 8th against the Vikings at Soldier Field. And September 8th can't get here soon enough, Grote, because I think we are all really going to need actual game action that matters and where the results matter so that we can all start to have intelligent conversations about what's happening with this football team. I'm sure you're aware on social media this week, another little mushrooming story with Caleb Williams being shown at a practice here in recent days where they were doing a net drill. He described it, and we'll hear from him in a minute, where he missed a bunch of throws in a row, and it became sort of a viral highlight that everyone was sharing and commenting on and using as some form of referendum on where the quarterback's development is. And then from there was other net videos that popped up, and I saw former Bears quarterback Chase Daniel doing like a Zapruder film type of deep dive on what the second net drill video showed and how it contrasted to the first net video drill. We are in the dumb days of camp here, Grote. That's the bottom line here, particularly on social media, where it's just the Wild West nowadays. And I don't even know how you keep your arms around some of the nonsense that's out there. I will tell you this before we hear from the quarterback. I saw a tweet. This would have been on Tuesday evening that listed statistics from Tuesday's practice for Caleb Williams that were completely made up. It was some random account with a blue check mark that made up statistics from Caleb Williams from that day. And then people were arguing in the replies to that tweet about Caleb Williams' day, even though everything in the tweet was fabricated. And you're like, okay, so let's get to the games where we're all watching the same thing, where the numbers are irrefutable and they're official. But let's also hear right now from Caleb Williams, who was asked about the aforementioned net video.
So there's this video. and I think
it's hilarious.
Yeah, some national places, I think,
they blew it up, and it is what it is.
What happened in the video?
Yeah, so it's a quick deliver drill. So you catch it. You're not trying to get the laces or anything. It's not like you're going through reads, and it's just catch, deliver, and try and deliver to the bottom left corner. And we're trying to aim as if it's a screen, and so. It's a competition between us and the guys, and so how fast you can get it out, how accurate you can get it out, and they just so happen to blow that one up and not any other one. So it's a fun drill to work on, accuracy, not using the laces, and also just being getting your feet up under you and working those throws.
So when people say it's some indication of what's happening to you at camp, what do you say about that?
I just laugh at it. It's I look at them and I laugh at them as always. we're out here working. We're getting after it. We're competing, and that's one of the drills that we were competing. And, we actually have a rule in our QB room is that if you miss the board, you have to do something funny or something like that, or miss the net. You have to do something funny. So we've had some competition, in those areas also. So it's just something fun, something competitive. And I was competing, and it was I missed it, and it was a fake anger that I had that I showed because. That's what you're competing with your friends, and something like that happens. You give a little, maybe a little, a few words that you may say, or choice words after losing to your buddies.
Dan, I haven't heard this much attention to a tweet since Justin Fields questioned his coaching at a press conference. So,
what are you referencing?
That one was very credible, though. I will say that. I'll also say this, a couple things about Caleb Williams, man. Like one thing that will never be taken away from Caleb Williams is his ability in front of the press. The fact that he was kind of laughing about it, that he was sort of expecting the question, sounded like he was happy to answer it. Very good response. It reminds me of the Wickersham stuff that came out this past year, and he was laughing about the fact that, it was reported that he doesn't know how to watch tape. So he may be a little bit more angry about this than he's letting on, but he presents himself very well in these circumstances.
Yeah, and listen, like Caleb's very polished at the podium, and it is one of his strengths, and now you want him to be just as polished when he's playing quarterback for the Bears. And I'm not going to get bent out of shape over the net video that circulated around the internet this week around social media. But we are now 13 practices in training camp, and I'm still waiting for a performance from QB1 that I would identify as impressive on a day. And, I had a chance the other day to visit with Ben Johnson for something bigger that I'm working on. And there's a lot that's being heaped on Caleb Williams. We've talked a lot for the last 3 weeks about the pre-snap stuff and the operational stuff. Ben talks also about EPA. We heard that in the spring from him about that being a metric that they've identified as one that determines winning and losing as frequently as anything else in the NFL these days. And one of the things that they're looking for there, is increased accuracy. It's ball placement. It's being able to not just complete passes, but complete them where receivers can then take them in stride and turn them into big gains. And Ben referenced with me the other day a pass from Family Fest where it was a nice little short completion to Romadunze, but if the ball was where it was supposed to be, it's a touchdown. And then it becomes an explosive play and everything goes up from there. And so I do think it is fair to put the quarterback under a microscope and to scrutinize his performance in camp and to be honest with people and say it has not been real sharp through 2.5 weeks of camp. And from the practices you've watched, I think you would agree with that. And that's okay to acknowledge. I always go back to 2019 when, you'd get the questions from the outsiders, friends, family, people in the neighborhood and say, how does Trubisky look? How's Trubisky look? And you'd go, not real good. And they'd go, it's just training camp. And you go, okay, well then why did you ask me? So right? Like that's where we're at. Like either you're curious to know or you're not. And if you're curious to know, I don't think the quarterback has cleared the bars that I think that the Bears would have hoped he would have cleared by now. And they've got some time. Again, we're a month out from the opener, but let's just be honest about where we're at and where they need to go if they want to be competitive with an early season schedule that's going to be pretty demanding with Vikings Lions right out of the gates.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about it on the radio today. It's like we as reporters, that our job out when we're at practice, look, of course we're going to give our opinions when we're here on this podcast, but when we're out there reporting, when you're out there reporting, Dan, when I'm out there reporting, we're going to tell you what we see. We're going to tell you if Caleb Williams is struggling. And relatively speaking, there's been a lot of days where he struggled. Now, you can take that information and do with it whatever you want. Use whatever disclaimers you'd like. New head coach in Ben Johnson. Completely, obviously, new offense. Everything he's got to learn. New defense. New coaches. Everything about the building is different. You take that information, and if you need all of those excuses and those caveats, and it's real, I'm not condescending to anybody right now. Like if that is part of the story. And if you, as a consumer of the Bears, want to take all of that and use it and let it dominate, that's fine too. We'll tell you what we see. And Caleb Williams, unfortunately, is not stringing days together. You could even take into account, if you would like, we don't know everything that the coach is trying to do with Caleb Williams. We don't know if there are plays that, to some degree, maybe he was set up to fail, that he's going to we're going to make you throw into double coverage here and see how close you can make that pass. We're going to make you heave it down the field in a stressful situation. We don't know all the scenarios. So you can take all of that and put it in, and we do too. But what we are seeing on the front lines is a guy that just hasn't had quite, as you said, Dan, I keep using the word and I keep using it, the sizzle, even though sometimes it's there.
Right. And, like Ben has been very forthright in saying, look, like I threw Caleb and the entire offense into the deep end of the pool. I just think that we would like to see more water treading than thrashing, at times where you're like, oh man, like let's not be so uncomfortable and let's start to figure out how to operate in the deep end of the pool. And so that time is coming. The hug I would give everybody, and me, I love to give hugs. I walk around this building just hugging people all
You're a
the time.
cuddly guy, Dan. You've always been. Yeah.
It's just to tell people that like the reason that the Bears went all in to get Ben Johnson is they believe that he has a combination of football intelligence and emotional intelligence that will allow him to lead through all of this. And that as they get closer to week one and the preparation for the Minnesota Vikings, they'll understand how to set their players up for success based on the successes and failures they've had through July and August. And that's a head coach's job, is to figure that out. Who are we now? Who are we going to be? And how do we kind of navigate those things simultaneously as we're trying to put together a football team that can be competitive and win games? And so that's part of this process here. And, Caleb today also talked a little bit about his own impatience, about, trying to see the game through the same lens as Ben and saying, look, like I had to do this with Lincoln Riley in college, and ultimately we got on the same page and the results were there. But there is a level of impatience of not being where, he thought he would be at this stage. And so he's navigating that a little bit. Q&A that I've got coming out with him at chicagotribune.com on Friday morning. We'll talk all about the marathon that this is. And Caleb acknowledging that while this is a marathon, that elite marathon runners run like 4.5-minute miles every single mile of a marathon, right? And so like he understands that this race is a long race, but it also requires you to sprint for 26.2 miles, and that's part of the process there.
Because Ben Johnson is here, the Bears, I think, are in the best position they have ever been, like in the modern era, the best equipped to develop a young quarterback. And I'm even going back to Jay Cutler and what was around him. I didn't think there was, because it was every year there's a new offensive coordinator, obviously. And I know we've had some of that here in the modern era, different coordinators for every quarterback that has been here. But in terms of a staff around a guy, better than Jay Cutler, better than what was around Mitch Trubisky, better than what was around Justin Fields. And it's because of Ben Johnson, unless Ben Johnson is not what we think he is. But I feel pretty confident saying that they're putting him in a position to win better than they ever have, not just with the coach, but the coach is number one. He's the star of this show right now, but also the interior of the offensive line. And I know things at left tackle have not been hammered out, but that will get there. The drafting of another wide receiver in the second round this year, the drafting of a tight end / wide receiver type in the first round, and Colston Loveland, DJ Moore getting paid. Of course, that was way back when. Roman Dunze is in his second year. So he is as equipped as he has ever been, and maybe a Bears quarterback being put in a position to win better than any quarterback we've seen in the modern era.
Right. And like the level of impatience that we're talking about the quarterback having is magnified like 100 times over amongst the fan base that's been waiting for a team to have sustained success for 30 years. It's been waiting on a team to win a playoff game for more than a decade. And so you feel that edge from the fan base of being like, well, I don't know how long I want to wait around for this thing to come together. We're inside the building here. They have to be like, we've got to make sure that we do this at the pace that makes sense with given, the potholes in the road and everything else that comes up. We've got to adjust to that. And so this is going to be fascinating because that forgiveness is not going to be there in the outside world. If this net video that we just talked about a minute ago is any indication, the entire world, the national media is ready to pounce on anything Caleb Williams, whether it's success or failure. It's going to be, announced through a megaphone on the loudest volume possible, and everyone's going to scream about it. And so they have to ready themselves inside the building for what that is. It's clear through the year and a half that we've had with Caleb that he is aware of the outside world, right? Like, and he may handle it well, but he's certainly not insulated from it, and he knows what's being said about him out there. And so that noise is only going to get louder. It's going to be deafening at times, and they're going to have to figure out how to navigate through all the impatience and what you and I are sort of forecasting are this inevitable inconsistency that promises to be there in the early going of the regular season.
We're going to get to his backup, Tyson Bagent, some interesting things that he is saying and things that are being said about Tyson Bagent. But Dan, if you will, take me back to, because I am actually, talk about FOMO, missing that physical practice that the Bears had the other day. You were, as you always are, on the front lines. Tell me more about what you saw with the pads popping and the Bears going all out in that practice.
I mean, honestly, Grote, it was an old days practice. It was just one of those old days practices where you're like, yes, this is what camp used to be like. Physical, a lot of pads popping, a lot of action, a lot of live tackling action, which you heard from some players after practice saying, like, we didn't plan to do that much live tackling. And then the emotion of the day just kind of made it a free-for-all, almost by design with the Bears going out there. It was a practice designed to work heavily on goal line and short yardage situations. And so you put the big boys in the pads for goal line and short yardage, and you expect some pads to pop and some physicality to happen. And then it just kept escalating, and it kept escalating. And then there was the first skirmish of camp, right? And you know how titillating that is for everybody that's out here. Oh, the first skirmish, we've got it. It's, it's Jaquan Brisker trying to take Tyler Scott's head off and vice versa. And then you got the second skirmish. And then you had the third skirmish. And then you had Roschon Johnson throwing the football at Jonathan Owens. And then you had Braxton Jones and, Austin Booker and Javon Dexter going at it. And so there was a level of intensity to the entire afternoon that was very notable. And I know people saw that on social media with everybody kind of chiming in. Like this practice was up there in terms of the physicality and the intensity and all of the emotion that was out there. Really, really kind of cool to be back in that environment again where you're like, yeah, all right, like this feels like football again instead of just like a bunch of drills and then you get like 4 minutes of sort of semi-real football and then you're back to drill. This was an old football practice, and it ended the way I think Ben Johnson wanted it to end, with guys feeling their blood boiling a little bit. It was used to measure some toughness and some competitive tenacity, and they got plenty of it out of that session on Tuesday.
Hey man, I will steal a Matt Nagy line here. You got to get calloused out there, and there is some truth to that, to actually feel the pain, a little bit, because it's just, there's just not, I mean, we see it every year in the NFL in general, teams not ready to go early. And that's, unfortunately, it's really out of the control in a lot of cases of the coaches, because there's so many padded practices you could have. But as you said, Dan, hadn't seen a practice like this in forever. Same with your colleague Brad Biggs and many other eyewitnesses, that this is what teams have to do. Aaron Glenn, who was part of that Dan Campbell staff, he's playing his starters in the first preseason game. And I get that's not completely unoriginal to do early on in the preseason with a limited amount of games, but man, they got to do something, the NFL and the Bears, just to be better early on in the season.
And two of the biggest hits Tuesday, there was Jonathan Ford, the defensive tackle, came right through in a goal line situation. I think
he's a big boy. He's a big boy now.
Might have been Roschon Johnson, but it was just a hit in the hole near the goal line that, you heard the hit and then you heard the woo of the defense where it was like, yeah, that was a straight up run stuff there. And then later in the practice near the sideline, Major Burns, the rookie safety out of LSU, absolutely, I can't remember who it was, what the receiver was, but right near the side. I mean, it was as loud of a hit as you're ever going to hear at training camp. And you were waiting to see a chalk outline on the side of the field there because it was that big of a hit. And you could tell that he got it so clean. When the tackler knows how clean the big hit is and gets, Major let out a pretty major howl to borrow a David Haughism there, and then off we went in a practice that was up there. And then today, Thursday, much less intense. The Bears kind of ramping up for what promises to be a very competitive afternoon against the Dolphins on Friday, and we hope to see a little bit more of that fire and that tenacity kind of coming to the surface when the Dolphins are in town.
I'm assuming there's no more indication of who's going to play against Miami on Sunday in the actual preseason game, which I actually understand. I'm guessing that a lot of it's going to depend on what we see in that joint practice, right?
Yeah, and look, Ben's been very honest from the get-go that this joint practice is something that he really wants to lean into with the scripted competitive periods in a controlled environment, that they can get a lot more work out of this, as we've seen a lot of coaches lean towards in the preseason in recent years. So my hunch is that you're not going to see much, if any, of the starters on Sunday. But then there is this question, and particularly with Caleb and the offense, is like, how much do they need to just polish up some of this operational stuff on that type of stage? And so I did talk to Caleb today, asked him just generally, like, you played in the preseason as a rookie, you seem to take some value out of that. Like, what do you want to do? He doesn't seem to have a preference, but did acknowledge that, yeah, it is good in the preseason to get some of that rust knocked away and not have your first kind of game reps coming when you're playing on Monday Night Football in front of the entire football world against a division opponent in a game that means a lot.
Yep. One guy who's had a pretty good camp so far this year is, we told you we talk about Tyson Bagent, the backup quarterback to Caleb Williams. It does appear that there's no funny stuff going on, that he is the second string quarterback and Case Keenum will be third. We'll see how they stack up their roster when it gets down to that. But I know that you happed upon some interesting audio of folks talking about the Bears backup quarterback, Tyson Bagent.
And so as we've heard this kind of consistent praise for Tyson Bagent's growth and development through his, camp here in season 3, there's been some consistent themes here. And so I wanted to play a little bit of it. I think we'll start with Declan Doyle, who was the first a couple weeks ago to kind of comment a little bit on where Tyson's at. And here's the offensive coordinator commenting on QB2.
Tyson is no nonsense. He's businesslike. Football's really important to him. He's excellent in the position room, and out on the field, he's constantly communicating what he sees and where he needs to go with the football. Coming back, what the problems might be. He sees the game pretty clearly, and I think that's because he takes it really seriously and he studies.
That's a consistent theme, Dan, and the hearing coach Ben Johnson say something similar about how important football is to him, that he studies his ass off, and that he's always ready for 10 to 20 burpees.
Yeah, and a burpee broad jump challenge if you need him to be. And so that's there. And then Case Keenum, right? Like, this guy's 37 years old. He's been around football for a long time, knows a lot about the position, and is unsolicited on multiple occasions here in the last couple months, talked about how he sees Tyson Bagent playing football and playing quarterback in this league for a very long time. And this is a guy that's competing with him right now for a role in the offense. And so let's hear a little bit more from Case Keenum on his kind of impressions of Tyson as well.
I think Tyson's having a really, really good camp. I think he's made a step forward from the spring. He's picking up this offense excellent. I mean, he is sharp. He is really, really smart. We try to stump the Schwab with him in there in the QB room. Him and Austin and Caleb, we try to stump each other, and man, we can't ever get him. He knows the playbook like the back of his hand. So I've been very impressed with him. He's athletic, and really haven't even seen him probably do what he's really, really good at in escaping rush, making plays outside the pocket. During practice, it's been a lot of the within the pocket, within the timing of the play, making some really accurate plays down the field. And I think he's going to play a long time in this league.
Dan, I think the Bears have a good backup quarterback. That's what they have. They have a good second string quarterback. And, the only critique that I have for Tyson Bagent is a physical one. And I've talked about it, and that's arm strength, just seeing the zip. But this is look, if you're the backup quarterback, you damn well better know that playbook inside and out. You got to be ready to jump in at a moment's notice. The other thing I'll say too, Dan, is what I'm realizing about Case Keenum is that they gave the appearance, I think, early on that maybe he was competing for the second string job. Case Keenum is here. He wants to play. He's still competitive. All of that. They brought him here to be the adult in the quarterback room, and that's exactly what he's doing.
Yeah, and he has been, right? And his insight matters, and his ability to kind of help both these guys along is valuable, because you're kind of developing two quarterbacks at once with Caleb and Tyson, given the hopes that the people inside this building have for what Tyson can become. And look, like, if he never plays as a long-term starter with the Bears, he can become a piece for you, an asset, that eventually you use however you feel fit to use it. The guy who obviously is the most important in this conversation is Ben Johnson, and he was asked about Tyson this week as well, and he was the latest to kind of add a testimonial to the brochure.
Your assessment of Tyson through the first few weeks?
Man, he's been phenomenal. I mean, he's smart as a whip. Appreciate the seriousness and intent that he brings every time he walks into a room. Meeting room, walk through, it doesn't matter. He's locked in. He's focused. I think his teammates feel that from him. Love the fact, he'll throw the ball and he keeps working through his progressions just so it goes home with exactly where everyone's going to be in case he had to move on. I think he's taking this seriously. He's preparing the right way, and I couldn't be more thrilled that he's here with us.
One of the things that Ben Johnson's talking about there, Grote, is this habit that Tyson Bagent has where he throws the football to one of his first couple reads, and then he just continues going through all the reads on a play. So the ball will be out for the first read on the slant, and that he's kind of doing his feet just in case he didn't make that throw in real life. Where would he go next? And so that's one of these habits that the head coaches really enjoyed watching. I mean, you hear these superlatives that they're throwing. They talk about him being smart as a whip, about football being important to him, about him being locked in, knowing the playbook like the back of his hands. These are things that people inside an NFL building value to the highest level, right? And so I think that's what you're hearing is some very positive reinforcement for what Tyson has been and who he can become. And I wouldn't be so surprised, and you can let me know what you think, if some of that is also a little bit of directed commentary towards the starting quarterback to understand that, hey, look, there is some stuff here from a guy that's really locked in, and the results are coming because of how locked in he is.
When Case Keenum, I think it was the cut that you played, was talking about how they like to quiz each other, and how, the indication was, and there was no denigrating of Caleb, but there was the propping up of Tyson Bagent, and obviously that's exactly like that part of the game. They want that from Caleb Williams. Tyson Bagent is not close to, like, there's no replacement talk or anything like that, but he is well thought of in the building, and his work ethic is maybe second to none in that building in terms of the way that he has comported himself.
How about Case Keenum with a Stump the Schwab reference as well?
Yeah, I love that.
To prove that he's almost in our demographic of old guys.
That's always the beautiful part about the third string quarterback in a locker room. You could talk to those guys about old guy stuff. So that's always very fascinating. A couple things here before we get out of here. Number one, I've been hearing that Dan Wiederer will be on the score at 5:00 on this day that we are recording here on Thursday. So you could hear Dan talk to Spiegel and Holmes a little bit later on. Again, I will have on Caleb Williams along with Layla Rahimi Friday, 1:00 on the score. And Dan, your Tribune Q&A with Caleb will be coming out on Friday morning. Is that
Friday
correct?
Morning. That's
actually...
my understanding. Yeah, I think
Okay.
you got that right. And unless I've got some bad information, I think Friday morning will be the time to find it at ChicagoTribune.com.
Cool. So we got Bears stuff. Dan and I are spitting it out left and right, the Bears content here. And we thank everybody for listening to this podcast here today. So for Dan Wiederer of the Chicago Tribune and the Score, for Adam Studzinski, the executive producer here and from Chicago Sports Radio 670 The Score, I am Mark Grote saying, again, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching the Take the North podcast.
Great talk. See you out there.